I'm coming. This whole fucking town is going to die. We're coming back, you bastards! Sarah, be my bloody Valentine. Daddy, gone away. Harry Warden made you pay.
Hey Ghouliacs, Valentine's Day has come and gone, but this isn't a month that's full of love. There's plenty of other types of love, like obsessive, possessive, toxic, fatal, just to name a few. In this episode, I'll share with you a brief history of Valentine's Day, unlike the one we celebrate today. I would also like to share some of my favorite films that I will discuss later with two special guests. Those special guests are two representatives from Serving Children and Adults in Need, or known as SCAN, a local nonprofit organization that provides programs for people dealing with addiction, mental health, trauma, just to name a few. Anyways, sit back and relax and think to yourself, is love really worth dying or killing for? A brief history of Valentine's Day, the festival of Lupercalia. This festival dates to 753 BC, which is around the time Rome was built. It centers on two brothers, Romulus and Remus, who were first nurtured by a she-wolf. Then random strangers stumbled upon them. They were brought to the nearest village. Long story short, they founded Rome. Not only that, once they grew up, they found their own ideology, known as a Lupercal. So it was their priesthood. One of their practices was that during the month of February, or what scholars believed it to be February, these men would have celebrations. They would get together and feast. Then later, they would sacrifice either dogs or goats. They claimed it was because of the symbolic fertility they would represent. So basically, they would mark the animal's blood onto these priests with sheepskin. After this, the priests would run into town naked and start whipping everyone they would run into. Women was their specialty. The women would beg to be whipped because they considered it a privilege, and to be marked symbolized fertility. Anyways, this festival was later condemned by a pope because he believed things were getting out of hand. This festival was later turned into Valentine's Day, which its upbringing was hypocritical. Now that you know the brief history, there are so many films that deal with love and Valentine's Day, but there's some creepy films that show the dark side of love. Some of my personal favorites are in no particular order that I watched this month are Fear, released in 1996, Fatal Attraction, released in 1987, Swim Fan, released in 2002, The Crush, released in 1993, and Play Misty for Me, that was released in 1971. As mentioned earlier in the show, we have two special guests, Jocelyn and Victoria from SCAN, who will share their insight on the behaviors showcased in these films and how they relate to real life issues. Without further ado, here's my interview. Hope you learn a thing or two. Hey Ghouliacs, I'm here with two special guests. Ladies, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Okay, so I'm Victoria Sedna. I'm the primary prevention coordinator from the SASE program at SCAM.
And I'm Jocelyn Starato, the primary prevention educator for the SASE program here at SCAN.
Thank you for accepting my invitation and being part of this episode. Can you please tell us more about your organization, SCAN?
Well, thanks for having us. And so SCAN is a behavioral nonprofit organization to help people in the community with various things. Um, And so there's different programs. I believe there's 44 programs. We're in the sexual assault program, and so we really focus on prevention, before sexual assault or violence even happens. And so it's a lot of education and outreach and events and campaigns.
Okay. I want to talk about the list of 5 films that I sent you. While we're talking about these films and while I'm giving you the synopsis of each one, I want you as professionals gives your insights on what these films relate to and identify the behavior issues. Let's go ahead and talk about The Crush first, since you said that you've seen the film. The small synopsis about this film is this journalist who goes ahead and rents this apartment. The owners of the apartment are well off. I think they're doctors. He stumbles upon their daughter. The daughter's a 16-year-old. She pretty much starts, invites herself into the apartment, wondering what he's doing, and she starts to gain this infatuation towards him. The journalist pretty much says, we can't be doing this because you're a minor. She doesn't understand that. This is the first time she's ever fallen in love with someone. My question is, because these things do exist, what can an adult do if they're faced with this type of situation?
Well, I feel like in the sense of this movie, I haven't seen it, but from what it's telling, it's portraying this girl, I'm guessing as the seductive one, as the one that's taking the lead or making him be in this relationship. I'm guessing because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, which is how it is.
It usually is portrayed like that in Hollywood, but in reality, if a 16-year-old girl comes on to you, you as an adult, it's your responsibility to, tell them to back off. Because you're in the position of power here. Like, in no way can a minor force you into a relationship when you are an adult. Like, that's not how that works.
Right.
But Hollywood does have a tendency of romanticizing it and justifying it by being like, oh, it's because she did this, like she was so seductive, like he couldn't help himself.
Yeah. And you can't fault children, by law, and there's a reason why minors are minors, right? Because they're not at the age of consent where they're able to agree to have sex, right? And in this case, it's with someone that's older. Yeah, and I think as far as like the obsession thing goes, like, because I know she ends up doing like pretty vile things in the movie, and like even with the girlfriend, he has a girlfriend too. It's played by Alicia Silverstone.
As soon as she sees the girlfriend, she just like goes on a rampage, like jealousy and not even in her relationship.
Yeah, and then like you have like the other aspect of like obsession, and so there was like a few notes that I took down that reminded me of like my knowledge on the subject. We teach the abusive cycle, right, and behaviors, and there's different phases in that cycle. To kind of like be aware of, right, like the red flags. So with that, I would say like there always are red flags. It's just whether you recognize them or not. And love can be such a powerful thing, especially infatuation. So when you're beginning a relationship, it's really hard to see those signs because you're so phased. Love really is a drug.
Can you please tell us more about this cycle?
So at the beginning of the cycle, you have a honeymoon phase, which also happens in healthy relationships as well, except in an abusive relationship, the person is love bombing. So they're going to do the most, right? Like Casanova, sweep you off your feet. It's going to be like a movie. They're going to be extra attentive, like extra catering to you, putting you on top of a pedestal, which in a healthy relationship, they probably wouldn't do that. Um, Again, unhealthy relationship is extremes. And so after that honeymoon phase, the main indicator is you're going to start feeling devalued, right? Like that person isn't giving you the same attention that they would, versus in a healthy relationship, naturally there would be more trust and you would grow, right? And like, yeah, of course, the facade of this person being perfect, right? Or how you would view them in the honeymoon phase, which is about like a couple weeks to 3 months. You're going to start seeing that they have flaws like any other human being, but it's not going to be, you would feel safer, right? Going back towards being in an unhealthy relationship, the devaluation phase is whenever you might start getting ghosted, or the person might start throwing jabs at you, right? And you feel that betrayal of trust, and they might even insult you and laugh about it, right? Like if it's okay. But it's not okay. And these are the little signs of abuse. You might start feeling anxious, right? If you have guy friends or friends of the opposite sex, like you're just going to start feeling anxious, trying to meet up to their standard, right? Or you might even feel like, oh, I'm going to upset them. You're going to have that eggshell, walking on eggshells feeling at this point, and you will see the signs of controlling behavior, jealousy. And they might frame it in different ways, right? Like, oh, this is trust, like we have each other's passwords, or, but it's when it really comes down to it, there is a lack of boundaries that shows up here. And it's whether you want to partake in it or not. Then after the devaluation stage is the full on like abuse stage, right? Where you really see their true colors, like they're going to pop off. This is where I say ish hits the fan. This is when you see like the full on abuse, right? They might get very aggressive. There might be sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. Like they'll totally like degrade you, like insult you. Um, and you really see them or what they've been hiding. Because usually in an abusive relationship, there's like a mask, right? And usually it's like they're charismatic and warm and charming and all these things. The mask comes off during this phase, and you see that this person has been hiding a lot of like deep rooted issues. um so that's usually a very painful stage. The victim or the person on the receiving end of this abuse is feeling very confused. It's like, how can someone so wonderful and nice be, this person that like had a moment and slipped up? And the main markers of a toxic cycle would be for the person to gain power and control over the other. So at this stage, this person, the victim, is feeling confused. It's really hard to piece the two different polarities together. And of course, they would want to stay with that person, right? Because they're in love. They want it to work out. If they do want time, or they want to break up, then the abusive person is going to love bomb them again, right? Or they're going to manipulate them back into their relationship to maintain that power and control. It's all about power and control. It's not about love. It's not about, oh, the person, they're going to blame it on other things, right? There's going to be a million reasons. Crocodile tears may even show up, but they're false promises. And it's just a tactic to get you back. And then it's going to happen again and again and again. And that's how you know it's toxic, because it's a cycle, and it continues with or without you. The person might discard you, move on to someone else, and then they're going to act the same exact way.
Going back to what you explained about the cycle, there's another film that's on this list, and it's called Fear, and it stars Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon is in high school. She goes to a bar, well, not a bar, maybe like a restaurant, and she bumps into Mark Wahlberg. Looks like, a stable, nice guy. They end up getting to know each other. He's picking her up one day from high school in his car. He notices that Reese Witherspoon's best friend gives her a hug. And as soon as he sees that, he gets off the car and he runs towards them. He pushes her and he starts beating up this guy right then and there in front of the high school, in front of all these students. And she's like, you got it all wrong. Leave me alone. And he goes ahead and just feels so confused, because obviously he didn't know that they were friends to begin with. But that's the start of this toxic behavior in this film. She doesn't want anything to do with him, but then she realizes that I should give this guy a chance to explain himself. Once he explains himself, Guess that window is open all over again to see where this relationship goes. After that, she notices that her best friend ends up sleeping with Mark Wahlberg, the guy, her boyfriend, at this party that he had no idea she was at. There's this moment in the film where she decides to go and see what he's up to, but he's at this party, and she, through a window, she sees that the guy goes ahead and tries to make a move on her best friend. The best friend ends up telling her that, hey, why are you mad at me, what happened? And Reese Witherspoon's character is, you know what you did, why don't you just be upfront about it? And the friend is like, I'm so confused what you're doing. And then that's when she tells her that he made me do it by being so aggressive with me. I think he pretty much rapes her. On that film perspective, what are the red flags when it comes to giving this person another second chance after realizing that she saw him cheat? I guess force her best friend.
First red flag was what you said in the very beginning, like he beat up another guy. Like that's
Yeah.
already a
Yeah.
red flag, like a big one.
Yeah.
Not having control and jumping into conclusion and immediately like
Yeah.
going in for the punch.
Yeah, oh my gosh. And that like reminds me of like just, here at the Rape Crisis Center, a big part of prevention is talking about like breaking down gender norms, right? And like we gave a presentation this past weekend. Yeah, this past weekend on like how it's socially accepted for guys and for men to be angry and to have these outbursts. And we're like, oh, boys will be boys. Like, it's like this aggressiveness and violence is tolerated when in reality they're suffering, right? And it's like they're exploding like a volcano because they don't know how to process these emotions because it's not socially acceptable, right? Like boys don't cry. That's how most of the male population is raised, which is unfortunate because everyone has feelings and everyone needs to process them. Like everyone experiences sadness and anxiety and fear, and unfortunately for guys, the way that it's channeled, especially if it's in an unhealthy way, is through anger. And so these like explosive situations are prone to happen. And so I think that definitely is not something to be normalized because with that comes the potential for violence and violence to other people, to hurt other people.
How we saw how you said that he just beat up that guy, and then she
Yeah.
still was able to give him a second chance. Why? Because it's expected, or it's he just likes me a lot, so she
Right.
did this guy
Yeah.
for me, so it's okay. Let me still give him another chance.
This guy just snaps because he found out that he knew about making a move on her best friend, sleeping with her. And after that he snaps. He tries to try to see if he can explain himself again, but she's like, no, I'm not gonna do this. And so he tries to terrorize her family. He One night, in this film, she gives him the password of the house because her parents end up going out of town for business. And so since he knows the password, he tries to try to get into her house to see if he could talk to her again, forcefully, obviously. There's another film that I want to talk to about. It's called Play Misty for Me, and it's a 70s movie. It stars Clint Eastwood. And this film, he's a DJ. He's on the midnight shift. He just plays his music and he answers calls to his fans in the middle of the night. And there's always this one fan that always asks to play Misty. And he's like, okay, whatever. And then after his shift, he goes to a bar and he ends up bumping into that fan. They end up having a one night stand. After having the one night stand, he goes ahead and lives his life. They end up hooking up a couple of more times, but he starts to rekindle his old relationship. During that process, she puts herself as she wants to have like all the attention, and she starts terrorizing his career by stalking him, trying to figure out who's he with so he can stalk her and harm her. He obviously starts to report it to the cops. She goes into his house and vandalizes his house. There comes the scene where he realizes that there's no escape from this woman. Question for that one would be, what are the red flags when it comes to that kind of situation, when it comes to You know, at the very beginning, she was a fan. She stalks him all around town. I guess her whole point was to end up bumping into this guy, this DJ, without him knowing this fan existed.
You mentioned it. It's
Yeah.
stalking. Like
Stalking is like a huge red flag, and
Mhm.
it's like sometimes, and especially if it's between the sexes, if stalking happens, it could be like, oh, they really like you, or they're a good person, like they're trying, like, and a good dating advice, or not a good dating advice, but a common dating advice that people give is like, well, they're, persistency, and that kind of can undermine someone's boundaries. So it's like extremely important to have those boundaries set for dangerous people that do stalk. Because like you said, like stalking can lead to killing and violence and all these other things. So, and I just want to say like the difference between love and infatuation is that I wrote this down. So people who can love can accept no as an answer. Stalkers instead are egoistic individuals who tend to satisfy their need to possess and object. And love is not a possession. So it's their inability to accept the no. Both idealize, right? When you love someone, like I said in the beginning, in the honeymoon phase, you don't really see the person truly for what they are unless you have a healthier attachment style, which we can talk more about. But the difference is the tolerance of rejection. Someone who does love will be sad, but they'll be able to detach. They'll understand that no is a no. And a stalker, or someone who has these like obsessive needs to want someone, it's not really love. Like I said, it's really like satisfying the ego. I would say notice those red flags, understand what stalking is. It's not like in movies it's romanticized, right? Or it's like thrilling. And in real life it's not. It's your safety.
That's another question also that I have. The question is, why do we glamorize toxicity in relationships? In doing so, we have normalized the behavior, and in return, the people who are involved in the relationship get to you reap what you sow type of consequences. Why have we normalized all that?
Well, because people find it interesting, like you have like true crime podcasts, and it's like, oh my gosh, right? This like love obsession, or in movies, like the way that they kind of like spin it for you gives you this like warped perception of like, oh, this is love. Like for instance, like 50 First Dates, right? It's like, oh my God, he's so persistent with her, and it's like in really reality, he's stalking her. I mean, I still love 50 First Dates. Don't get me wrong, like I do, but
Yeah.
when you look at the behaviors, you're like, this isn't romantic. One thing that I will say about reality versus like movies is that there are a lot of movies that will have these like stalking behaviors, right? Or the guy, like for instance, like The Notebook, right, where he's like hanging off of the Ferris wheel, and he's like, oh, he's pressuring her into accepting a date,
I remember.
right? And so she was saying no, so he manipulated
Yeah,
her in a
lead her
sense, or like
close.
forced her to say yes, right? Or else he was going to die by suicide. And so it's a very romantic movie, and at the end it's always ends in this like fairy tale, right? Like, oh, they end up together and it's this beautiful movie. In reality, if you're seeing those behaviors at the beginning of a relationship, they're going to persist. Like there is no fairy tale with people like that.
Because in films, they're fictional characters at the end of the day. They're not real. In rom-coms, you have a sense of, that he's not going to hurt her. You know that he's doing this out of love. It's a love story. So you know that it's going to end up well. She's going to be okay. He doesn't have any ill intent in what he's doing. And you as an audience, you know that. So that keeps you from going with the film and romanticizing that. But when you put that in a real life perspective where you don't know how the other person might actually be, they're most likely going to be dangerous.
If they're starting off with those behaviors, for sure.
Because a fictional character is not, in a rom-com, a fictional character is going to stick to the archetypes of a romantic character. They're not, even if they have those stalking or abusive traits, they're not going to hurt the other person. But in real life, when you transfer that, you don't have that. You don't know what that other person's thinking. You don't know what that other person is capable of. And that is very much like the reality versus the fiction of that aspect, the romanticizing abusive relationships. It's easier to romanticize it because that's how they see it in films, but transferring that into real life, it doesn't work because you don't know that person to that extent how you see characters in films.
Right. Like, because you're an audience member. Like stalking behavior is extremely dangerous. Like you said, it leads to killing, leads to harm, and it's not romanticized, it's not love.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It works within the film aspect, and it's fine as escapism because it's safe. that it's gonna be okay. But in reality, those traits they're gonna lead to something dangerous. They're not ideal. They're not ideal traits.
The last two films, the first film I want to talk about is Swim Fan. This film came out in 2002, so it's pretty old. Anyways, in this film, it's about a high school couple. There's no stalker involved in the beginning yet. So this new girl moves into town. Her name is Madison. And Madison, during school, they always bump into each other. The boyfriend, his name is Ben, and he's in the swim team. And his girlfriend is Amy. She's like an artist. So he bumps into Madison, and Madison starts getting like a crush on him. But one random night, he's driving down the street in his truck, and he accidentally bumps into her. Like, he doesn't run her over, but he was seeing something else while he was driving, and she just stumbled upon in front of his truck. And so he presses the brakes, and he's like, "I'm so sorry, let me give you a ride home." And so she's like, "Okay." So he drops her off. That was the end of that. She leaves one of her notebooks in his truck. Maybe it was her doing and leaving something like that in his truck so that they could meet up again later.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he takes her notebook to her house. He drops it off. After dropping off the notebook, she's like, "I'm so stressed. Maybe we could go get some fresh air or whatnot." She already knows that this guy has a girlfriend already. He mentioned it to her. Eat a burger or something like that. But after the burger, she says that, "I don't want to call it a night just yet." And so Ben is like, "What do you want to do?" They end up, since he's a swimmer, he takes her to the gymnasium, the swimming pool, and he starts to swim, and she's like, "I don't know how to swim. Can you teach me?" One thing led to another. They start getting close, and they end up hooking up in the swimming pool. After that, he drops her off. He feels terrible about this. I remember before hooking up, she goes ahead and tells him, "Just tell me that you love me. You don't have to mean it. Just tell me that you love me." And so, this is so awkward, but whatever. It happened. After that, they end up bumping up in school. She's, when are we going to meet up again? And he's like, "I don't know. I don't think I could do that anymore. You already knew my situation, and I just don't want to do that anymore." But she ends up finding out that there's this party that his girlfriend is hosting. Shows up at the party. She starts to get to know his girlfriend then and there before he arrives at the party. She tells him that she left her underwear in his truck that night at the party. His girlfriend was about to go move the truck because it was in the driveway and it was causing traffic or whatnot. But then the boyfriend's like, "Let me go run to my truck before my girlfriend finds out that there's underwear in my truck from the girl that I had a one night stand with." The girlfriend doesn't end up finding out that night that he cheated on her. Later on through the movie, she bumps heads with the girlfriend, and she tells her that, "Hey, I hooked up with your boyfriend." Later on in the movie, I think that's when the Madison girl snaps, and she ends up going to Ben's mom's house. She just invites herself in. "Ben told me to come over your house because it's your birthday and I brought you flowers." And now they're looking at baby pictures of him, and he's like, "What are you doing here? You just met me, and now you're here to meet my mom, and my mom doesn't even know who you are. She knows that I'm in a relationship and whatnot." It just goes up really bad from there. She ends up trying to kill Amy.
I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was like, it came out in 2002, so I was like 7, but I remember seeing it.
It ends with her. They go back to the place they had that one night stand at the pool. Since she doesn't know how to swim.
Oh, I don't want to hear it. I want to watch it again. I'm just kidding.
I guess I have some questions when it comes to this film. Was the movie about rejection? Was the movie about stalking?
No, it was about stalking and obsession. I think so.
Yeah,
So we didn't
infatuation.
talk about the stalking even is, right? But it's an abusive behavior. It's a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for the person's safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. And the tactics of stalkings are unwanted phone calls, texts, social media, unwanted showing up, right? Showing up out of nowhere, showing up at the mom's house, definitely, right? Approaching the individuals, their families, friends, monitoring, surveillance, right? And I know like back then there wasn't any find my friends or find my iPhone, but that applies to today. You don't have to do it in person nowadays. You can stalk someone through their phone and online. Exactly. So two or more incidents make this a pattern, but this varies by state. And of course, it's the intolerance of not being able to take a no at the end of the day. But with this woman, it's interesting that she went as far as to kill the girlfriend, because there's this, I don't want to say debate, but there's mixed information online where stalking is usually, you would think that someone who is capable of stalking, it's like, well, they're obsessive. For sure, it goes back to attachment style, right? The anxious attachment styles, how we connect with other people. Some people are just naturally very clingy. When it comes to obsession, though, it doesn't always mean that the person has a mental illness. Reportedly, it's only less than 2% of stalkers that have a mental illness, but there's also mixed information that suggests that less than half of stalkers do have a mental illness. Of course, not everyone is diagnosed, and there's a lot of factors that come into play. For those that do stalk and have mental illness, the suspecting disorders would be borderline attachment style, and those that display psychopathic traits, which would be antisocial disorder. Not as a clinician, but I mean, if you're capable of killing somebody, a lot of killers are psychopathic or psychopaths. Yeah, that's antisocial traits, most definitely.
In the film, she grabs his truck keys and she makes a copy for herself. So one day she drives away in his truck, him not knowing, obviously, and she uses the truck to run over his girlfriend.
Well, I want to watch this movie.
I've never watched it. Hearing this is like, dang.
Yeah.
It can't be.
I mean, but it's so true though. It's not just like a movie for entertainment purposes, but like this happens in real life. Obsessive love and killing.
How do you
And it
spot
might not make sense.
behavior?
How do you spot what?
Obsessive behavior.
Oh, well, I mean, just unwanted phone, like I said, lack of boundaries, unwanted phone calls, showing up. And more than anything, sometimes if you're not able to recognize the signs, it's really important to recognize the feelings that are going on inside of you. Your instinct will tell you something's wrong with this person. You know when someone's creeping you out, you have that instinct in you for a reason, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. Unfortunately for women, we're raised to be nice, be kind. So there's this man that wants to help me. I'm leaving HEB. I need to put my groceries in the back of my truck. And he's like, no, don't worry. Like, hey, I can help you with that. It's like, oh no, it's fine. Thank you. But if he's persistent, like, no, don't even worry about it. I can help you. Not a big deal. Well, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just like, it's a foot in the door technique, the persistence. And that person might not be obsessive or stalkerish or psychopathic, but he might be. He might feel that interaction or get addicted to that person, follow that woman home, feel that there's some sort of connection on his end. Because again, she allowed for that to happen. Again, I'm not saying this is going to happen all the time, but most importantly, for women especially, or for anyone, if you have that instinct, don't ignore it. It's better to tell someone, hey, F off, whether it's at a bar, whether it's if they're coming on too strong, you don't like it, you feel uncomfortable. It's better to just state your boundaries than to be nice, than to be polite. Don't be rude. And we're raised to be these like courteous human beings, and when we're faced with a predator, not going to help us at all. That makes us prey. So it's important to and you don't necessarily have to be rude about it, but if you have to be, I mean, stalkers don't have limits. They don't accept a no. So if you once said yes and then you're saying no, they're going to hang on to that obsession of you and that idealization of what they think you are, who they think you are. They're not going to let it go. And it's going to interfere with your safety. And that's how a lot of women get killed, because most of the time women are targets. And we see it like in the news, like we were just revisiting the very famous case of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander, where she was obsessed with him. The friends warned him. They had lived in two total different states. She couldn't take no for an answer. And so she knew the code to his house. So she would put in the code, walk in, and then sometimes he would say yes, sometimes he would say no, but it's the lack of boundaries, right? That sometimes he would say yes, so she was like, all right, that's fine. They make a mile out of an inch.
Who's affected more when rejected, men or women?
Oh, that's
I don't think we we have statistics on
no,
that.
it's the same. Like
Yeah.
we're all human. It's not we all experience emotions.
The thing is, there is obviously women are more in danger, right? We're more likely to experience sexual assault, sexual violence. That's just a proven fact by statistics. So we have more reason to fear when we're out there. When someone comes up to us and they ask us for something, we're scared of rejecting them because we see the reality, we see the numbers, we see the cases. So that's there. But when it comes to rejection, I feel like
feelings are
yeah.
feelings, people are people.
Women do have that reason to fear. They might get attacked or something when they reject someone, which is why it's hard. It's hard for women to say no. And even sometimes when they say no, that's not enough.
Definitely.
So which is why our job is to teach youth. We start young. We try to teach them boundaries, which are important to have, because if you grow up as a youth with healthy boundaries and you learn how to be emotionally connected to yourself, then you're less likely to be a perpetrator in the future. Because we also want to stop perpetration, not just victimization, right? We also want to start perpetrators before they
yeah.
And we do these things where we teach them how to be like emotionally connected. We teach them what boundaries are, which are so important, and what consent is, how to take it gracefully. We go over it very in detail,
Right.
so they understand it, which is why I think if you don't know those things like that could happen, that we're talking about, stalking, sexual violence. What we try to do in our job, which is try to teach our community about these things, how to protect themselves, and also just how to
connect with yourself in a healthy emotional sense, and how to accept or reject. No one is like, yay, rejection. Like it's hard for everybody, but it's something that we could all work on practicing, right? How to handle it better.
By being educated, that's for sure.
Education makes a big difference.
What about the term toxico when it comes to the society here?
That's true.
When it comes
it's like
going to a store and for Valentine's Day, and there's a balloon that says toxica.
I mean, it's normalized, it's romanticized, it's a part of our culture.
Stems
Realistically speaking, how good does it feel to be with a toxico or a toxica? It doesn't feel that good on the inside. You're laughing about it and you're like, joking, because there's like that like shared experiences and stuff. At the end of the day, you're going to go home. You're not going to feel good about it. You're going to cry to yourself if you don't feel comfortable talking to other people. Toxic relationships just don't feel good. They degrade you. You have a lower self-esteem if you let other people treat you like garbage. Your self-worth lowers. You become isolated. So like the normalization of that kind of makes way for toxic behavior to continue happening. Unfortunately, it's like, oh, toxico, toxica, but if you don't have a friend that's like, hey, like maybe you shouldn't be with this person, then of course at the end of the day it's up to you. Like we all have free will.
And also I feel like it's also like a symptom of lack of boundaries, and we mention boundaries a lot because I feel like boundaries are a big thing to have when you're in a relationship. And if you don't have boundaries, then that's where the toxicity sneaks in. It stems from toxic views of masculinity, and toxic views of femininity also go into that toxic ideal that people have.
I think that's a really good point. Part of being toxic is just thinking, oh, you need to be a certain way because you're a man, or women need to be a certain way. Like you're a woman, you should act like a lady, right? You should dress this way, you should talk this way, like don't have an opinion. Or you're a man, you should be making more money than me. You should be, giving me like money, sprinkle, sprinkle. Or so there's these standards that are unrealistic that people have to, so it brings a lot of tension in a relationship because of you have these expectations and you're not really valuing the person for who they are. You're putting them down for why they're not the way you want them to be, which is silly. They're silly standards, and that's really not what like love is.
Our coworker told us to mention this because when it comes to stalking, because we talked a lot about stalking today, and the thing with stalking is we ask victims to trust their instinct and also to record. If anyone's ever going through stalking, to record and document incidents that happen to them. Because the thing with stalking, when you go to the police, they're gonna want to see
like the history, right?
History.
Like, well, what did they do? And if you're just kind of like, oh, Oh, I don't know. It's easier to take note of it as it's happening,
Yeah.
to build like a little file. And when you see it written down, it's different because you're able to like comprehend it better.
And there's this website, it's www.stalkingawareness.org, and they have a document there specifically that you can download. And if you're going through stalking, you can document. And they have other resources. That's where we get a lot of information from when it comes to stalking. So just to let the public know.
Pretty exciting to talk about this. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. That wraps up our Valentine's Day special. I'd like to thank Jocelyn and Victoria from SCAN for sharing their expertise on toxic behavior traits. Please check out the films that we mentioned in our interview. I'm sure you'd enjoy them yourselves. Check out our episodes, follow us on our socials, and stay tuned for more. Remember, if you're not listening to Ghoul Radio, it'd be a lot cooler if you did.